The rain was relentless, pounding the cracked pavement of Maple Street like it wanted to drown the world. Ethan Carter, soaked to the bone, stood trembling outside his neighbor's door, his heart hammering louder than the storm. He'd come to ask for a wrench, something mundane, to fix a leaking pipe, but what he found would unravel his life. Ethan, 25, had lived in this sleepy Ohio suburb his whole life, a place where everyone knew your name but not your secrets. He was the quiet type, tousled brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, always carrying a journal where he scribbled thoughts he never shared. Tonight, though, desperation drove him to knock on Caleb Monroe's door, a man he barely knew beyond polite nods at the mailbox. Caleb, 28, was an enigma. Tall, with dark eyes that seemed to carry a lifetime of unspoken stories. He'd moved into the house across the street 6 months ago. Whispers followed him, divorced, ex-military, a loner. Ethan didn't care about rumors. He just needed help. His basement was flooding. His landlord was useless, and his own toolbox was a pathetic collection of mismatched screws. He knocked again, harder, water dripping from his jacket onto the porch. The door creaked open, and Caleb stood there, his broad frame filling the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was low, almost a whisper. Ethan, right. What's wrong? My basement's flooding, Ethan stammered, clutching his journal like a lifeline. I just need a wrench. I didn't know who else to ask. Caleb's eyes flickered, not to the journal, but to Ethan's face, searching for something. Then he said it, the words that stopped Ethan cold. I know what you're hiding in that book, and I'm not sure I can help you unless you're ready to face it. Ethan's breath caught. His journal wasn't just a diary, it was a confession. Pages filled with truths he'd never spoken aloud. Truths about who he was, who he loved, and the fear that kept him silent in a town that valued conformity over courage. How could Caleb know? And why did his voice carry such weight? Like he'd been waiting for this moment. The storm roared on, but the world seemed to pause. Ethan's mind raced, run, lie, or stay. He didn't know Caleb. Not really. But something in the man's gaze held him there. A mix of challenge and understanding that made his chest ache. What do you mean? Ethan finally managed, his voice barely above the rain. Caleb stepped aside, gesturing into the warmth of his home. Come in. We need to talk. Ethan hesitated, his sneakers squelching on the porch. This wasn't about a wrench anymore. It was about something bigger, something that could break Heimer, set him free. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him, shutting out the storm, but not the one brewing in his heart. Inside, Caleb's living room was sparse but warm. A single lamp casting soft light over a worn couch and a coffee table cluttered with books. Ethan stood awkwardly, water pooling at his feet, as Caleb leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I saw you once, Caleb said, his voice steady but heavy. At the park, writing in that journal. You looked like you were carrying the weight of the world. Ethan's face burned. He remembered that day, scribbling furiously, pouring out his longing for a life where he didn't have to hide. He'd thought he was alone. You were watching me. Not like that, Caleb said quickly, raising a hand. I was running. I saw you, and I recognized that look. I've been there. Ethan's grip tightened on the journal. You don't know me. Maybe not, Caleb admitted, his eyes softening. But I know what it's like to hide who you are. To be afraid of what happens if you don't. The words hit Ethan like a punch. He wanted to deny it, to laugh it off. But Caleb's gaze was unrelenting, seeing through the walls Ethan had built. He sank onto the couch, his wet clothes sticking to his skin. Why are you saying this? He whispered. Caleb sat across from him, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Because I've spent years running from myself. I was married. Ethan. I tried to be someone I wasn't. And it broke me. I don't want that for you. Ethan's throat tightened. He'd grown up in a town where different was a dirty word, where his parents' church preached love but practiced judgment. He'd known he was gay since he was 15, but saying it aloud felt like stepping off a cliff. His journal was his only safe space, and now Kaliba, a near stranger, had seen into it. I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan lied, his voice shaking. Caleb didn't push. Instead, he stood, grabbed a towel from a nearby chair, and tossed it to Ethan. Dry off. I'll get the wrench. But when you're ready to talk, I'm here. Ethan watched him disappear into the garage, his mind a tangle of fear and relief. Caleb hadn't judged him. He hadn't turned him away. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen not as the quiet kid next door, but as someone with a story worth telling. He opened his journal, staring at the words he'd written months ago. I want to be free, but I'm terrified of what it costs. Caleb's words echoed in his head. Maybe freedom wasn't just about speaking his truth, it was about finding someone who'd listen. As Caleb returned with the wrench, Ethan made a choice. He'd fix the pipe tonight, but tomorrow, he'd come back. Not for tools, but for answers. For the first time, he felt a spark of hope that he wasn't alone. The next morning, Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, the storm a distant memory. His journal lay on the nightstand, its pages heavy with secrets he'd guarded for years. Caleb's words lingered. A quiet challenge. I know what you're hiding. Ethan couldn't shake the image of Caleb standing in his doorway, his dark eyes piercing yet kind. It wasn't just about the wrench or the flooded basement, Anna Maria. It was about the possibility that someone else understood the weight he carried. He dressed quickly, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination, and crossed the street to Caleb's house. He knocked, half expecting no answer. The door opened, and there was Caleb, wearing a faded flannel shirt, his expression softer than the night before. Back already? He asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I wanted to return the wrench, Ethan said, holding it out, though they both knew it was an excuse. Caleb took it, stepping aside to let Ethan in. The living room felt different in daylight, less like a refuge and more like a space where truths could be laid bare. Ethan sat on the same couch, his journal tucked under his arm. Last night, he began, his voice unsteady. You said you recognized me. How? Caleb sat across from him, his hands clasped. I've seen that look before on myself. Years ago, trying to fit into a life that wasn't mine. I was married to a woman I cared about, but I couldn't love her the way she deserved. Because I'm gay. Ethan. The words hung in the air, raw and unapologetic. Ethan's breath hitched. He'd never heard anyone in this town say it so plainly, without shame. You're out, he asked, barely above a whisper. Caleb shook his head. Not here. Not yet. Back in Virginia, I tried to live the life everyone expected: wife, house, stability. But it was a lie. When I left the army, I left that life too. Moved here to start over. But starting over doesn't mean you stop hiding. Ethan's chest ached. Caleb's story mirrored his own fears, the pressure to conform, the suffocating weight of silence. I've never told anyone, Ethan admitted, his fingers tracing the journal's spine. My parents, they're religious. They think it's a sin. I don't know how to be me without losing them. Caleb leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. You don't have to lose them to find yourself. But you do have to decide what you're willing to risk. Ethan wanted to believe him, but fear clawed at him. He'd seen what happened to kids like him in this town: whispers, rejection, or worse. Yet here was Caleb, A man who'd walked through that fire and was still standing. Ethan opened his journal, his hands trembling, and read aloud. I dream of a day when I can love without fear, but I don't know if I'm brave enough. Caleb listened, his expression unreadable but his eyes steady. When Ethan finished, Caleb said, "You're braver than you think. Writing that took guts. Sharing it takes more." Ethan's throat tightened. He'd spent years hiding, but in this moment, with Caleb's quiet strength across from him, he felt a flicker of courage. "What do I do now?" he asked. "Start small," Caleb said. "Find one person you trust. Tell them. Not everyone, just one. It's like opening a door. You don't have to walk through all at once." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He thought of his sister, Lily, 22, who'd always been his confidant. She was in college now, but maybe she'd understand. The idea terrified him, but it also felt like a step he could take. Before he left, Caleb handed him a mug of coffee, a small gesture that felt like an anchor. "You're not alone, Ethan," he said. "And if you need to talk, my door's open." As Ethan walked home, the journal felt lighter in his hands. He wasn't ready to shout his truth to the world, but Caleb's words had planted a seed. Maybe he could be brave one step, one person at a time. That afternoon, Ethan called Lily. Her voice was warm, familiar, and when he said, "I need to tell you something," his heart raced, but he didn't hang up. He wasn't ready to say the words yet, but he was closer than he'd ever been. Lily's voice crackled through the phone, full of her usual energy. "Ethan, what's up? You sound weird." Ethan sat on his bed, the journal open in his lap, his fingers tracing the words he'd read to Caleb. I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice shaking. "But not over the phone. Can you come home this weekend?" Lily paused, then softened. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Ethan swallowed. "It will be. I just need you here." When he hung up, his heart was still pounding, but it wasn't just fear, Anna Maria, it was anticipation. Caleb's advice echoed, start small. Lily was his safe harbor, the one person who'd always seen him for who he was, even when he hid it. But saying the words aloud would make them real, and that terrified him. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself crossing the street to Caleb's house more often. It started with small excuses, returning the coffee mug, asking about a creaky floorboard, but each visit chipped away at his walls. Caleb was patient, never pushing, but always ready with a question or a story that made Ethan feel less alone. One evening, as they sat on Caleb's porch, Ethan asked, "How did you know? About yourself, I mean." Caleb leaned back, staring at the stars. "I was 19, in the army. Met Samania guy in my unit. We never acted on it, but the way I felt about him, it was undeniable. Scared the hell out of me. I spent years trying to bury it, but you can't outrun who you are." Ethan listened, his chest tight. He'd had those feelings too, crushes he'd dismissed, moments he'd buried. "Did you ever tell him?" he asked. Caleb shook his head. "He died in a training accident. I never got the chance. That's why I don't wait anymore, not when it matters." The words hit Ethan hard. He thought of the years he'd spent silent, the chances he'd let slip by. He didn't want to live with that kind of regret. "I'm going to tell Lily," he said, almost to himself. "This weekend." Caleb smiled. A rare, genuine one. That's a start. When Lily arrived on Saturday, her curly hair bouncing as she hugged Ethan, he felt a surge of hope. They sat in his small living room, the journal between them. "So, what's this big secret?" she asked, her eyes teasing but kind. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands trembling. "Lily, I'm gay." The words hung in the air, fragile but real. Lily's eyes widened, then softened. She reached for his hand. Ethan, I love you. Always will. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Tears stung his eyes. I was scared. Of losing you. Mom, Dad, everyone. Lily squeezed his hand. You're not losing me. Ever. And we'll figure out the rest together. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he could breathe. Telling Lily was like opening a window in a room that had been sealed shut. But as they talked, he realized the next step would be harder as parents. Lily promised to be there, but the thought of their judgment loomed large. That night, Ethan went to Caleb's, his heart lighter but still heavy with what lay ahead. I told her, he said, standing on the porch. She's okay with it. Caleb's eyes lit up. I'm proud of you. That took courage. Ethan smiled. A real one this time. I'm not done yet. But, thank you. For seeing me. Caleb nodded. And for a moment, their eyes locked. A quiet understanding passing between them. Ethan felt something Nawa warmth. A pull he couldn't name. He pushed it down, not ready to face it. But it lingered as he walked home. The days after telling Lily were a blur of relief and dread. Ethan felt lighter, like he'd shed a layer of armor. But the thought of telling his parents gnawed at him. They were devout, their lives orbiting the church where Ethan had spent his childhood memorizing verses about sin and salvation. He loved them, but their love came with expectations he'd never been able to meet. Caleb became his anchor. They'd meet on his porch or in his kitchen, talking about everything and nothing music. Books, the army, Ethan's job at the library. Each conversation peeled back another layer of Caleb's past, revealing a man who'd fought his own battles with identity and loss. Ethan found himself drawn to Caleb's quiet strength, the way he listened without judgment. But he also noticed the way Caleb's hand lingered when passing a coffee mug, or how his smile made Ethan's heart skip. One evening, as they sat on Caleb's porch swing, Ethan asked, "How do you do it?" Live with the fear of what people think. Caleb's gaze was distant, fixed on the darkening street. You don't. Not really. You just learn to care more about your own truth than their opinions. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Ethan nodded, his journal open in his lap. He'd started writing again, not just confessions, but dreams about a life where he could love openly, maybe even with someone like Caleb. The thought made his face burn, and he quickly changed the subject. My parents are coming for dinner tomorrow. Lily's making me tell them. Caleb's eyes softened. You ready? No, Ethan admitted, laughing nervously. But I have to try. The next night, Ethan's small apartment was filled with the smell of Lily's lasagna and the weight of unspoken words. His parents, Ellen and Robert, sat at the table, their smiles warm but tinged with the formality Ethan knew too well. Lily kept the conversation light, but Ethan's stomach churned. After dessert, he cleared his throat. Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. His voice shook, but Lily's hand on his arm gave him strength. I'm gay. The room went silent. Ellen's fork clattered onto her plate. Robert's face hardened, his jaw tight. Ethan, he said, his voice low, you know what the Bible says. I know, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. But this is who I am. I've been hiding it my whole life, and I can't anymore. Ellen's eyes filled with tears. We raised you better than this, she whispered. Lily jumped in, her voice fierce. You raised him to be honest. That's what he's doing. Robert stood, his chair scraping the floor. We need time, he said, and they left without another word. Ethan sat, numb, As Lily hugged him. "They'll come around," she whispered. But Ethan wasn't sure. He felt like he'd lost something irreplaceable. But he also felt free. The next day, he went to Caleb's. His eyes red from crying. Caleb didn't ask questions, just pulled him into a hug. It was brief, but it grounded Ethan, reminding him he wasn't alone. "You did something huge," Caleb said. "Give them time. And give yourself some too." Ethan nodded, his heart aching but hopeful. He was starting to see Caleb not just as a friend, but as something more, someone who made him want to be brave. Weeks passed, and Ethan's parents remained distant. Their silence was louder than any argument, a reminder of the cost of his truth. But Ethan wasn't alone anymore. Lily called daily, and Caleb's porch became his sanctuary, a place where he could be himself without fear. He and Caleb grew closer, their conversations deepening. One night, as they shared a pizza in Caleb's kitchen, Ethan noticed the way Caleb's laugh lit up his face, the way his hand brushed Ethan's when reaching for a slice. The air felt charged, and Ethan's heart raced with a feeling he hadn't let himself name. "Caleb," he said, his voice soft, "why did you move here? To this town, of all places." Caleb's smile faded. "I needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could figure out who I am without the noise of my old life. But I didn't expect to find someone like you." Ethan's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Caleb looked at him, his eyes intense. "You're brave, Ethan. Braver than I was at your age. You make me want to stop hiding too." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Ethan wanted to say something, to close the distance, but fear held him back. Instead, he smiled, his voice barely a whisper. "You make me feel like I can do this." They sat in silence, the tension unresolved but warm. Ethan left that night with a new kind of hope, not just for acceptance, but for something more with Caleb. At work, Ethan faced whispers. Word had spread, likely from a church friend of his parents. Colleagues he'd known for years now avoided his gaze, and a coworker muttered "sinner" under her breath. Ethan's stomach twisted, but he held his head high, remembering Caleb's words, "Care more about your truth." One afternoon, a teenager at the library approached him, nervous. "I heard about you," she said. "I'm like you. I don't know what to do." Ethan's heart swelled. He saw himself in her fear, her hope. "You're not alone," he said, echoing Caleb. "Start with one person you trust. It gets easier." The girl smiled, and Ethan felt a purpose he'd never known. He was becoming someone who could help others, just as Caleb had helped him. That night, he wrote in his journal, "I'm scared, but I'm not hiding anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I'm falling for him." The tension between Ethan and Caleb grew, a quiet electricity that sparked in every glance, every accidental touch. Ethan found himself lingering at Caleb's house, their conversations stretching late into the night. He was falling, and it both thrilled and terrified him. One evening, as they walked through the neighborhood, leaves crunching underfoot, Ethan stopped under a streetlight. "Caleb," he said, his voice trembling, "I think I'm falling for you." Caleb froze, his eyes searching Ethan's. For a moment, Ethan feared he'd misread everything. Then Caleb stepped closer, his hand brushing Ethan's cheek. "I've been falling for you too," he whispered. They kissed under the streetlight, tentative at first, then fierce, like they'd both been holding their breath for years. It was Ethan's first real kiss, and it felt like coming home. But as they pulled apart, Caleb's face darkened. "We have to be careful," he said. "This town, it's not kind to people like us." Ethan nodded, the weight of reality settling in. They agreed to keep it quiet, at least for now. But the joy of that moment carried Ethan through the next weeks, even as his parents' silence grew heavier. One day, Ethan's father called. "We want to talk," he said, his voice strained. Ethan's heart raced as he invited them over, Lily by his side for support. The conversation was tense. Robert admitted they'd struggled with Ethan's news, but Ellen's tears were softer this time. "We don't understand," she said, "but we don't want to lose you." It wasn't acceptance. Not fully, but it was a start. Ethan clung to that hope, even as he hid his feelings for Caleb from them. He wasn't ready to risk this fragile truce. But secrets don't stay buried in small towns. A neighbor saw them holding hands late one night, and by morning, the whispers had turned to shouts. Ethan's boss called him in, her face grim. "We've had complaints," she said. "This is a family-friendly library." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Are you firing me?" "Not yet," she said. "But keep your personal life out of here." He left the meeting shaking, anger and fear warring inside him. He went straight to Caleb's, who pulled him into a hug. "We'll get through this," Caleb said. "Together." Ethan nodded, but the fear lingered. He'd found love, but at what cost? The town's judgment tightened like a noose. Ethan felt eyes on him everywhere, at the grocery store, the library, even his own street. Caleb faced it too, his mailbox defaced with slurs one morning. But they held on to each other, their love a quiet rebellion against the hate. One night, as they sat in Caleb's living room, Ethan broke. "I don't know if I can do this," he said, tears falling. "I thought I was ready, but it's too much." Caleb took his hand, his voice steady. "You're stronger than you know. We both are. We don't have to fight the whole town, just ourselves." Ethan nodded, drawing strength from Caleb's certainty. They decided to fight back, not with anger, but with presence. They joined a local LGBT support group, meeting others who'd faced the same battles. Ethan found solace in their stories, in the community he'd never known existed. At the library, Ethan organized a display of books on identity and acceptance, despite his boss's warnings. It drew attention, some negative, but also support from unexpected places. The teenager from before, Mia, helped him set it up, her smile a reminder of why he kept going. His parents began to soften, attending a family dinner with Lily's coaxing. They didn't mention Caleb, but they listened as Ethan spoke about his life, his hopes. It was progress, slow but real. One evening, Caleb surprised Ethan with a plan. "There's a Pride event in Columbus next month," he said. "Come with me. Let's be ourselves, even just for a day." Ethan hesitated, fear creeping in. But Caleb's hand in his was enough. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." The Columbus Pride event was a revelation. Ethan and Caleb walked hand in hand through a sea of rainbows, music, and laughter. For the first time, Ethan felt free not just to love, but to exist without apology. He saw families, friends, strangers celebrating together, and it healed something deep inside him. Back home, the fight wasn't over. Ethan's boss gave him an ultimatum: remove the library display or lose his job. Ethan chose himself. He resigned, but not before Mia and others rallied, starting a petition that forced the library board to reconsider their stance. Ethan's parents didn't come to Pride, but they called the next day. "We're trying," Ellen said. "We love you, Ethan." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. That night, on Caleb's porch, Ethan wrote in his journal, "I'm free. Not because the world changed, but because I did." He looked at Caleb, who smiled back, and knew they'd face whatever came next together. Their love wasn't a cure for the world's cruelty, but it was a light in the dark. Ethan had gone to ask for a wrench, But what he found was courage, love, and a life worth living. And that was worth everything.